Now, as we've been hearing, the Prime Minister has copped some criticism for how he announced the deployment of 3,000 Australian Defence Force reservists and Air Force and Navy craft for rescue efforts. The New South Wales Rural Fire Service Chief was caught by surprise, as we just heard, and shortly after the announcement, the Prime Minister's office released an ad on social media about the government's bushfire response.
To discuss this and more, we're joined by the economist and former Labor politician Craig Emerson, and in Adelaide, public policy and international affairs consultant Georgina Downer. Thanks to both of you for being here. Georgina, let's just kick things off with you, because for months when people ask about the link between climate chaos and bushfires, senior government officials have said that we shouldn't politicise the fires. Well, now we've got an ad. What could be more politicised than a political ad?
Well, I think this advertisement, as you're calling it, is really just a way for the federal government to get out the message that they are deploying ADF resources and they are doing what they can to respond to what is a catastrophic set of conditions across Australia. And I would like to also just acknowledge the amazing efforts that are being put in across the country by volunteers and fireys and everyday people supporting each other through this very, very, very difficult season. I mean, here in South Australia, we've just had catastrophic conditions in Kangaroo Island, and where I live in the Adelaide Hills, just before Christmas, people have lost their homes. People in my school community have lost their homes. It's been a very difficult time, and talking to people who've been on the fire ground, what they have been really focused on is getting through this time. They're not bothered by the politics. In fact, what they want is the support that they need to get through this season.
But if they're not bothered by the politics, then why is the Prime Minister engaging in politics? I mean, as recently as yesterday, I was being told by senior government officials that any criticism of the government's response is playing politics, and then they release an ad.
Well, I think it's incumbent on the government to get out the message what they're doing to help, and that they're doing everything they can.
Why? It wasn't just informative. It wasn't telling people where to go. It wasn't telling them what mustering stations to go to. It wasn't giving people important emergency information. It was promoting the government's action. It was a partisan political ad.
Well, that's your interpretation of it.
Not really.
I think that is your interpretation of it.
Well,
I think it's really important that people know that ADF reservists are being called up to help on these fire grounds and do everything possible we can to help these communities. People are in desperate need of information, of up-to-date information, and it's great to see people like Gladys Berejiklian and the Rural Fire Service in New South Wales and across the country in South Australia and in Victoria particularly, keeping citizens informed about what is available, what is being done, and that people do not feel alone in this crisis, that we are all rallying together. But I can tell you, on the fire grounds, and I've spoken to people here in South Australia, they are focused on getting through this period and getting all the support they can possibly need. And I must say the response I'm getting here in South Australia is that people are rallying together and we are getting through it, but it is an incredibly difficult time. And to have the ADF reservists come to assist, I think is an extremely good outcome. What I would say, though, I think the federal government's response probably is a bit slower than a lot of people would have liked to have seen, but it was really a welcome announcement yesterday. And I think quite understandable that the information from the announcement was disseminated in a timely manner.
All right, well, Craig Emerson, I want to bring you in here. For weeks we've been hearing the government saying that this is a state responsibility, that it's the federal government's responsibility to respond to the state's requests, and that it's got to be a coordinated effort, otherwise there will be chaos. We just heard from the Rural Fire Service Commissioner Shane Fitzsimmons there saying that he heard about this posture change, this step up and this send-in of the reservists through media reports. Is that okay?
Well, it seems strange because there's another media report just now that the Prime Minister's office is saying that the Prime Minister contacted the premiers just before the announcement. Now, you know, Gladys Berejiklian, who I think is doing a really good job, is just in that press conference with the Fire Commissioner. It just doesn't add up. Like, he's saying he didn't know, and yet the Prime Minister's office saying they told the Premier, and
well,
they're standing side to side.
And the Premier confirmed that in that press conference just now, that she did get a phone call from the Prime Minister. So look, one can only assume that was
not passed on,
next to the announcement that she was unable to pass on.
I don't know. And in terms of the coordination, look, I think we're in a different climate, literally a different world here, and maybe the idea of the model of states, kind of going it alone and then calling for help from other states and so on might have served us well in the past, but I don't know that we can assume that this model will work in the future, because they are catastrophic fires.
Do you think in that case that there will be change? The National Security Committee of Cabinet will meet tomorrow to talk about our long-term fire resources and how we fight these bushfires in the future. Do you expect that there will be a change in responsibility?
Well, I think there needs to be, and it's fine for the National Security Committee of Cabinet to meet, but they're not experts in this, right? And they're ministers, and I respect the fact that they are ministers, but they're not the authorities. And so what I propose is that there be a commission of inquiry when these fires settle down eventually, so that we get all the best information together and work out what is the best model for the future, rather than saying, well, this worked in the past, it's not obviously working now, and we'll try it again in the future, or we'll just grope towards some sort of outcome. And I mean this in the most constructive way, not an adversarial way, not a party political way, but to bring in the best of our expertise here in Australia. And it's pretty clear it's very, very good. I mean, I think that they've been marvellous, the fire services and the volunteers and so on. And on Georgina's point about getting information out, well, the ABC is unsurpassed in getting information out. I mean, if they made that announcement yesterday, I haven't seen Gladys Berejiklian putting ads to air with Liberal on it and a donate button. Now, that donate button to the Liberal Party is just there anyway. But again, it's just those little things where you'd say, let's just delete the donate to the Liberal Party button, just in case people might think it is political.
Georgina, the kind of summit that Craig is talking about putting together, where you would really get proactive about systematising how we respond in advance to these sorts of crises, is something that was proposed back in April or May by the team of ex-rural fire chiefs and emergency chiefs who requested a meeting with the Prime Minister both in April and again in May after the election, and who could foresee that this fire season was going to be truly devastating. And Greg Mullins, who's the boss and founder of that outfit, was basically saying, look, the Prime Minister has to get on the front foot and be asking for equipment now in the northern winter, when the Canadians aren't going to be needing all of their aerial equipment. We should be asking Portugal, we should be asking France, we should be asking Canada, and we should be treating this as if it's almost a war footing. Those requests were rebuffed. That sort of conversation never happened, and now yesterday we're scrambling to sort of do a little bit like that. Was that a mistake by the government?
Well, certainly Scott Morrison has indicated there will be some inquiry after we've got through this incredibly difficult season, and I do think as a nation we've got to come together after we've got through this disaster and talk about land use management, how we deal with our national parks and forests, and the way they intersect with communities who live on their fringes, and where we place our communities and how we fight these fires. The reality is we have a warming and a drier climate. We are going to have to adapt to this. I totally agree with Craig. We cannot continue with the situation and the processes and practices of the past. This is clearly something that is beyond those processes of the past, and we must come after we've got through this, when we are able to collect our thoughts with cool, calm heads and look at the facts and bring together the experts and make sure that across all levels of government and the community we develop a really, really robust plan of where to place our communities and how to fight fires like this that will be part of our future, unfortunately.
Craig, as Georgina was saying, we've got a warming and a drying climate.
Yeah.
So in those future talks, when we talk about how we address bushfires in the future and how we manage them, what part should climate change play in those discussions?
Well, I'd get the modellers in. Modelling is, in a sense, a bit abstract because it's trying to summarise a very complex world. But here's the thing. the modelling's been accurate. And the modelling's been around for a long time. Ross Garnaut's recent book, Superpower, confirms that the modelling has shown that there will be hotter conditions and drier conditions in the southern latitude. So climate change does need to be factored into it, and I don't care what people's beliefs in. I'm not going to have a political argument about it. It's just that the scientific modelling says that the lower parts of Australia will get hotter and will get drier. In Penrith yesterday, 48.9 degrees, one of the hottest places on earth in Western Sydney, beat its own record by 1.6 degrees. These things are important and they are different.
Craig, I've been on the air for about 12 days straight on ABC Radio Sydney, as well as on the weekends, with the exception of public holidays. And I have a real sense from listeners and viewers that something has changed, that there is a shift in the national mood, that people feel like if a foreign country had inflicted this kind of damage, Lord only knows how many bombs they would have had to have dropped. If a terrorist had wiped out an area the size of Belgium in New South Wales, incinerated it, we would be in a very different situation. We would be taking this a lot more seriously, and people are exhausted and they're frustrated, and I wonder what you want to say to them.
Well, what I want to say is it is a tragedy. I'm not going to be blaming particular political parties or levels of government. Let's look forward. Let's have a commission of inquiry. Let's make sure we do better for the future. And if I can mention all the animals that have died in these circumstances, you know, fire officers saying that they're just absolutely stressed out by the screaming of koalas who have been killed in these fires. And of course the loss of human life is right up there, but you know, there's been a lot of destruction.
Craig Emerson, Georgina Downer, unfortunately we've run out of time. We've got a lot to fit in this morning, but it's great to have you in. Thanks very much.
To both of you.
Thank you.